YouTube, what's up everyone? Hope you guys are all doing well. So today we're going to be doing the same thing that we normally do, which is grind some 2-5 down at the Seminole Casino Coconut Creek down here in South Florida. But now that summertime's rolling around and I have a little bit less obligations in terms of like school and whatnot, I kind of want to travel to some other poker rooms. So if you guys have any recommendations, really anywhere in the country, let me know in the comments. Eventually I want to get to them all. But who knows, maybe I can come to one near you guys and play. But yeah, but for today and for the foreseeable future, we're going to be down here in beautiful South Florida. So yeah, hope you guys enjoy. And yeah, I'll see you guys at the casino. Let's go.
All right, guys, we're in the game for $1,000. And the very first hand at the new table is ace king offsuit under the gun. So I open up the action at $20, pretty standard. But that bet does not get too far as the cutoff 3 bets to $50. Well, the action does not stop there as the button cold 4 bets to $150. What the heck is going on? Literally the very first hand at this new table. I apologize, the camera angle's falling a little bit. Let me fix it for you. And also, while I'm at it, I'm just going to go ahead and put in my whole stack for $1,000, but it's only around 600 effective as the cutoff only has around 600 and then the button has around 350. To my surprise, the cutoff puts in $550 more and makes the call. And at this point, the button is getting a pretty decent price, and she elects to make the call as well. So, definitely wasn't expecting this for the first hand of the night, but we have ace-king, and we probably can't be in that bad of shape. So sure enough, all the players at the table, we agree to flip our hands pre, and we're actually a favorite, as we are up against pocket 10s and pocket jacks, but all hope is lost as a 10 is on the flop. The turn gives us 2 outs with the queen of diamonds. Now all we need is a jack, but unfortunately, the card does not come, and we lose 600 in the first hand. Starting off the session, stuck 6 Benjamins, so hopefully we can crawl out of this hole pretty soon. Adding on for $600, so we're back at 1,000 when we look down at Queen Jack of Diamonds under the gun 1 orbit later. There's a button straddle, and the big blind makes the call. I like to bump it up to $45, pretty standard, and the button and the big blind are the only 2 customers as we are going 3 ways to a flop. So the flop looks pretty good. The flop comes down 10-9-5 with 1 diamond. So we have 2 overcards, an open-ended straight draw, and a backdoor flush draw. To my surprise though, the big blind donk leads for $55. I like to just make the call here. We have so much equity. I don't think a raise is a bad play by any means. It looks like the button agrees that a jam is the best play. She puts in her whole stack for $205. To my surprise now, the big blind actually folds. So now it's up to me. I just have to put in $150 to win a pot of $450. So getting a decent price. I like to just make the call, drawing to the nuts, and let's see if we can get there. Boom, right there on the turn, we hit our out, and I go ahead and just table my hand immediately, preparing to scoop a pretty decent pot, but the river is a queen. So now we chop with any other jack, and unfortunately, she has one herself with Jack 10. So she had us on the flop, we got there on the turn, and then she got back there on the river to chop the pot up with us. In this next hand, we look down at 2 queens on the button. The low jack opens up the action of $40, which is a pretty big raise in this game. Regardless, we have the 3rd best hand in No Limit Texas Hold'em, so I'm going to put in that 3 bet to $125. Action folds back around to the initial aggressor, the low jack, in which she puts in the rest of her stack for $350. I go ahead and snap it off because we do have the 3rd best hand in this game. When I snap it off, she looks a bit hesitant and uncomfortable, so that's obviously a good sign, but unfortunately, the flop comes down ace high. We do have a club though, which is good, but what's also good is a queen on the turn. I go ahead and table my hand, and we fill up on the river, but it looks like we were ahead the whole time as she has pocket 8s. Looks like my pretty aggressive image pays off, and we get the maximum queens versus 8s all in pre-flop. Not to mention, we're also 1 step closer to getting unstuck. I've definitely been the action player so far in this game. When I look down at pocket 3s in the +1 position, I open up the action at $20, and we get a call from the cutoff. The button, the player who had 10s in the first hand of the session, 3 bets us to $75. Action folds back around to me, and he's also playing pretty deep after winning that massive pot in the first hand. I like to just make the call, maybe a little bit loose, but we're both over 200 big blinds deep, so I don't think it's the worst play in the world. The cutoff gets out of the way, so we're going heads up to a flop out of position. So all of our worries go out the window when we flop bottom set on 7-6-3. I check it, and unfortunately, he pretty quickly checks it back. The turn brings an 8, which is a pretty good card to be firing on, as I'd be doing this with all my draws. So I like to size to the tune of $80. After checking the flop, I think he does have some sort of showdown value, or he could have a pretty strong hand and essentially just setting the trap against my aggressive image. Regardless, I'm happy to see him make the call, and we're off to see a river. The river is great for our exact holding. It is another 8, so we end up with a full house on the river. If he has a hand like 9-10, which I don't think he'll ever have, we're taking his whole stack regardless. But I think more likely than not, he's going to have a hand such as like 9s through jacks here, and essentially wasn't scared of too much on that flop. So I like to size up to $250, and he snap calls. That's always a good sign when you have a boat, but it's also bad because we definitely missed out on some value, and that is true as he shows down pocket 10s. So happy to scoop it, but unfortunately it looks like we did miss some value on that one. Getting lucky, we're officially unstuck and we're up around $125. And it looks like we can get some more when we look down at Ace King of Diamonds on the button. The hijack limps, and I go ahead and size up to $30. I think a larger sizing is fine on the button because essentially I'd be doing this with all my mediocre hands as well. So it looks like it doesn't really matter regardless, and I think the image is getting the best of me as almost every single player at the table defends. The small blind, the big blind, and the hijack come along as well. So we're going 3 ways to a flop, which brings no help whatsoever. It's Jack, Jack, 7 with 2 spades. We don't block much of anything, so when action does check to me, I think I'm just going to be checking this and taking a free turn. So the turn does look pretty good. The turn is a king of clubs, which brings another flush draw on the board. This time the small blind leads out for $75. Action does in fact fold back around to me, and now is a question whether I want to be folding, raising, or calling. I think calling's the best option, so that's what I do unless I evaluate a river. The river is a 7, so now there's 2 pairs on the board, and what's interesting is the small blind checks it over to me. So now it's a question whether I want to be checking or betting. Obviously, we lose to any jack or any 7, but both of the draws did miss. But at the same time, when you're going to be valuing, you have to be figuring out what hands you're targeting. And in this hand, I'm not really targeting much. So when I bet $125, I think that is a bit of a mistake, as the only hand I could call is maybe like king, queen, king 10, or an unbelieving ace high. Yeah, and it does look like it was a poor decision, as a small blind puts in the rest of his money for $450. With this exact player, this is never a bluff, so a bit unfortunate. I did put in $125, but I think it's a pretty clear-cut fold, as I think him bluffing this spot is pretty ambitious. I fold, and sure enough, luckily, he does show us a jack. So he played it pretty well, and we kind of valued ourselves on the river. Definitely should have just checked, but regardless, what can you do? We're back around even when I look down at jack 10 of spades in the hijack position. There's a +1 limp, and I go ahead and raise it up to $25. At this point, I have been playing a decent amount of hands, and the table seems to be realizing that, as the button, the small blind, and the under the gun player tag along as well. So we're going 4 ways to a flop with a hand that does flop pretty well multi-way. The flop does bring us a pair, but there's also 2 overcards with ace, queen, jack. So we have bottom pair, a gut shot straight draw, and a backdoor flush draw. Action checks to me, and in spots like this, I think I kind of want to stay balanced because I'd be betting all my strong hands here as well. I go ahead and bet $70, and this is actually good if I do get a call because this table is likely to check a lot of the turns and not lead them. So essentially we're seeing a free river. Sure enough, the under the gun +1 player calls, and we're off to see a turn. The turn is a 4 of hearts, and as figured, she immediately checks it over to me, and now it's a question whether I want to bet or check. We can bet to deny equity from any clubs, but if we get raised, that'd be kind of a disaster, so I like to just check, and we're off to see a river. So the river comes a 6 of spades, and she checks it once again. Now it's a question whether I want to take my hand to showdown or turn it into a bluff. I just take it to showdown, and it looks like we're good, as she tells us she missed. So we scoop a pretty decent pot with a pretty marginal hand. We're now playing 5-handed when I look down at 5-4 of clubs on the big blind. There's a button straddle, and I open up the action to $35. We do get one customer, as the player directly to my left, the under the gun player, calls, and the button gets out of the way. So we're going heads up to a flop in which we flop a flush, but not only a flush, we also flop a double gutter, so any 3 of clubs or any 7 of clubs will give us a straight flush. So I go ahead and bet out $30, which might slightly be on the smaller side, and it looks like that is the case, as the under the gun player does elect to make the call. The turn is a ace of spades, which I actually think this is a pretty good card, as I think the likelihood of him having a ace of clubs is pretty high, just considering the action. So with that being said, I'm going to size up maybe a little bit more on this card. So I bet out $65, and it looks like he does like this card quite a bit. He elects to put in that raise to $185. Well, it doesn't get too much better than this. So obviously, I'm trying to get as much money in now as possible. He is around $700 behind, which is a bit awkward. So if I rip it all in now, that is a bit big of an overbet, and I don't think he's going to be calling with a hand that's worse. So I like to min click it to $350, hoping that he will either rip it in himself or he calls and I can just go with it on the river. Even though my hand looks extremely strong, it is just a bit awkward with the stack sizes, and in retrospect, I think I might like a jam at best. Let me know what you guys would do in the comments below. Obviously, folding's out of the question unless you're an absolute nit. And you guys know I'm the opposite of that. Sure enough, he lets it go, and this was the last hand before this table broke, so I just show him, and we're off to another table with a pretty decent stack. Alright guys, before we get into this next hand, let me tell you about Rad Poker real quick. What Rad Poker is, it's a fast-paced heads-up no-limit app in which essentially strengthens your play in the casino but online as well. Rad Poker, it's a really new app. I think it came out in like February, so it has a lot of new stuff coming in the near future that you guys definitely want to check out. I'll keep you guys posted, but in the meantime, come download it and hang out. If you guys get paired up into a match with me, please let me know. But in the meantime, let's get back into some live poker hands. In the very first hand at this new table, we look down at Jack-10 offsuit in the cutoff. There's a button straddle and the big blind calls. I like to just make the call because truthfully, I was just getting my camera set up and I wasn't really prepared to be involved in a hand. Luckily, the button checks and we're off to see a free flop. Well, I kind of wish I put more money in as we flop the nuts. Unfortunately, action does check to me, and now we definitely need to be building a pot as there is a lot of draws available. I bet out $20. Unfortunately, the button gets out of the way, but the big blind does something that I love to hear. He puts in that raise to $65. Not big by any means, and no need to re-raise here, so I like to just make the call, and we're off to see a turn. The turn comes off a ace of spades. Unfortunately, this time he goes ahead and checks it over to me. When he checks it, I think he either picked up some showdown, maybe with like an ace of diamonds, or he has a jack and he's also pot controlling with that ace. Regardless, I play it a bit tricky and check it back. When the river comes a six of spades, this is a pretty inconsequential card. Hoping that now he agrees to value his hand, in which it looks like that is the case. He goes ahead and throws out a bet of $90. So all things considered, a pretty decent sized bet. What possible holdings could he have? Maybe a hand such as like king jack, queen jack, maybe an ace of diamonds, hands such as that nature that thinks it's safe to value the turn after me showing some weakness. But one thing that he does not have is a full house. So I go ahead and bump it up to $350, so a pretty big raise because we missed out value on the turn. And also, it's kind of cool because some friends that watched the vlog came up and said, hey, and he noticed. So it kind of looks like I'm also showing off. All things considered, it looks like his hand is good enough for a call. And sure enough, that's what he does. He flicks in the chip and we show him the bad news. So we played that hand extremely unorthodox. Let me know what you guys think about that one in the comments below. Maybe I did miss out a little bit more value on the turn, but regardless, can't complain with a pretty decent sized pot. Within an orbit later, we look down at 8-9 of clubs in the small blind. There's a button straddle and I open up the action at $30. There's a call from a player who's been pretty call happy from the under the gun position, and this time that same player that I got involved in last hand 3-bets us to $155. I think more times than not, he's going to be on tilt, and I think I might be able to capitalize on this situation. We're both sitting well over like 300 big blinds deep. After thinking about it, I think I do want to be putting in that re-raise. So the player that was trying to squeeze is about to get squeezed himself. I size up to $400, obviously hoping to take it down now, but if he calls, we're both sitting around 250 big blinds deep. He actually has me covered, so that's obviously a pretty good sign. The under the gun player does get out of the way as I figured, and looks like our play did work. In our last video, our squeeze did not go through, but luckily we do get one through it now as he lets his cards go right into the muck. I know you guys give me a hard time about showing the bluffs, but I think if I show one at this table, I can build a pretty aggressive image that will get me paid on later streets. In this next hand, we look down at ace queen off in the low jack. There's a button straddle and I open up the action at $30. Well, it looks like the player to my left, the hijack, likes his hand as he ships all of his $65 directly into the middle. Action folds back around to me, and a pretty easy call, and I'll let you guys sweat this one out with me. We agree to show our cards before the flop for a little bit of suspense, and it looks like it's a flip as they have pocket twos. So hoping to catch an ace or a queen, but unfortunately there is a 2 in the window. So all of our hopes of winning this pot basically go down the drain. We turn a gutter, but unfortunately we cannot get there. Yeah, so we lost 65 in that last one, but hopefully we can reclaim with king queen off on the small blind. It folds all the way around to the button, and he opens up the action at $20. I like to just flat call this, which I know I've said this a million times on my channel. King queen off is normally my 3-betting range, but ironically, I just haven't done it on the channel so far. Sure enough, the big blind calls, and we're off to see a flop. So the flop is 10 ace 7 rainbow. Checks over to the button, and he elects to bet out $30. He's playing pretty deep as well, and we have a gut shot, and our king high might be good a decent percentage of the time. So I like to make the call, and the big blind actually calls as well. So hoping to improve on the turn, which is a gin card. It is the Jack of Diamonds. Our ambitious call on the turn certainly pays off. I go ahead and check it to the button once again, and unfortunately this time he slows down. So we're off to see a river, which is actually a great card. It is a ace of hearts. The likelihood of one of these players having an ace is pretty high. So I like to bet out $175, a slight overbet. I kind of regret not playing this hand more aggressively because the likelihood of us getting more money would have been pretty high. And sure enough, the big blind actually elects on a call, which is great news. The button sighs and actually folds Jack 7. So I'm surprised he didn't bet the turn, and obviously when the big blind just calls, we're good all the time. So we get a bit lucky on this one, and this is just a good example of why you should play your hands a little bit more aggressively.
That's a good check back.
We're sitting with the Great Wall of China in front of us with around $2,500 in our stack. There's a under the gun limp, and I raise it up to $25 from the small blind. The big blind elects to call, and the under the gun player, who recently got involved in a big hand, jams all in for $225. Normally, the limp jam is always pretty strong, but with this specific player, I'm definitely just never folding. So I like to just make the call pretty quickly, and the big blind gets out of the way. So I'll let you guys sweat this one out with me once again. I tell him I have a pair, and he shows 5-4 of spades. So we can, in fact, beat that pair, and we take down a pretty decent pot, and we analyze the situation correctly. In this last hand of the night, we look down at Jack 10 of diamonds in the big blind position. There's a under the gun straddle, and the tightest player at the table opens up the action at $30. And to my surprise, the player that I just stacked, he rebought, and he 3-bets to $100. I like to make the call, which is probably pretty loose considering the prior action. The straddler ends up letting his cards go, and as figured, the under the gun +1 player elects to make the call. So we're off to see a flop, which looks great. It comes down 10 deuce deuce rainbow. Action goes ahead and checks to the hijack, and as mentioned prior, he has been on tilt, and it looks like he still might be on tilt as he overbet jams his whole stack in for $375. Action's now on me, and obviously my first instinct was to make this call, obviously, but I look over to my left at the +1 player who's been extremely tight, and from opening up from early position, his range is already pretty narrow. He already has calling chips cut out, so yeah, we call $100 pre-flop. We flop top pair, but we fold our top pair, and as expected, the +1 player does make the call, and I'll let you guys sweat this run out.
Don't do it to me. I'm such a beast.
Our analyze on the situation was correct. He did in fact have an overpair, and we got away folding top pair, only losing $100, which is a miracle in itself. And after that, a good fold. I think I'm just going to go ahead and rack up and cash out for the night.
Hand sanitizer stations have been placed throughout the casino floor.
Are you two? We just got out of there. Jeez, it's so dark outside. But yeah, we're in the game for 1,600, and we're out the game for 2,580. So we booked a profit just a hair below 1,000. The one eventful hand that I think I could have gotten away from tonight was that ace king hand. The reason being is all the players at the table, the images are like neutral, because that was literally the first hand of the night. So with that being said, when I open from early position, get raised and re-raised, the ranges are pretty narrow, especially, like I said, being the first hand of the night. If it was suited, I think that's a fine shove all day long for, you know, for 100 bigs. But, you know, I think I actually could have gotten away from that one. Sure enough, we were up against 10s versus jacks, which I think we were actually a favorite. But, you know, 10 came on the flop. Not to be results-oriented, but, again, I think I might have been able to get away from that one. You know, we played good. That second table we got moved to, I played my image pretty well. That Jack 10 hand where we flopped the boat. I like my check on the turn and then overbet on the river. I think that I would be playing all my busted draws that way. So, you know, I'm just super happy to, you know, play well and take it down. And obviously the cards run in our favor, minus the ace king hand. So I appreciate you guys for watching as always. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace. No, I just spit everywhere. Peace.